Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we're going to be continuing with the Leshem Shu'ev Achalayla around the Sefer and in the Sefer Hakdamus U'Sha'arim, which, like we said, was the last Sefer written but the first published, in an attempt to raise funds. Again, I always laugh at the notion that the Leshem Shu'ev Achaloma was sitting wondering about who was going to publish his Svarim. This is, I believe, the way that Torah comes down. That pas b'melech toicha, that there has to be that element of the impoverishment of the mind to not rely too much on anything in order for the Torah to kind of fully find its space. And it's true by the biggest tzaddikim in the world. Two nekudos katanos that I wanted to add before, and I'm going to be metzamseim, because especially the shita of tzimtzum and the leshem is like the whole Gans thing. But so for me to be metzamseim and go into the text, I believe I want to keep it to that. I want to learn inside. I want to see the letters of the leshem. But two nekudos that I wanted to say about the leshem. So this is a Masorah that was given over from Rav Moshe Shapiro Zchus Yagen Aleinu prior to his Petira, to a Talmud. I'm forgetting exactly the name. But generally speaking, when you look in the Bir Hagra on the Mishnah in Sefer Yetzirah, as well as the introduction of the Vilna Gaon's commentary on Sefer Ditzniusa, the two, not the most essential Kabbalah Svarim of the Vilna Gaon, but because there's Tikkunei Zohar, there's Yahal Or, there's everything. But there's a teaching that the world was created in a three-staged process. B'Sefer, B'Sefer, U'B'Sipor. So there's many different ways of reading what that means. Some say b'sefer, b'sofer, u'b'sipor, the book, the scribe of the book, and the reading of the book. But the way the Gra upholds the Girsa is that it's sefer, sefer, and sipor, meaning to say that it's a doubled form of a book, and then it's the telling over of the narrative. Now the Gra explains that the reason a book is doubled, sefer and sefer, is because there's the act of writing, and there's the act of reading that which is written. So it's a two-step process, Sefer and Sefer, that correspond to Chachma and Bina, the beginning of wisdom and the unfolding of understanding from within wisdom. And then the Sipor is the Das, it's the ability to convey the narrative in one fell swoop. And so from here, Rav Moshe Shapiro said that, generally speaking, when it comes to written texts in holiness, there is a distance, a discrepancy between the author of the text and the text itself. There's a sefer, and then you have the concept of a sipor, the teller of the tale, which is separate and apart. But Rav Moshe said there's certain svarim in the world that don't undergo such a distinction. There are certain svarim written in history where there's something referred to as segula satorah, avada chazal, the omni-significance of texts on every level. But there are also certain svarim from the achronim, and the rishonim obviously, that the distance between the author and the text is not so far, and when you're engaged in the text, you encounter the author themselves. And Rav Moshe said this is very clear and relevant in the writings of the Leshem Shu'ev Achaloma. Now, like we spoke about last week, the Leshem Shu'ev Achaloma is a textual system. It's a written system. He wrote like the Arizal wrote. And the Leshem, it's not that the Leshem didn't have students or yeshiva and therefore he wrote. The Leshem, l'chayr, was supposed to write and therefore he didn't have a yeshiva. He had different tzaddikim coming to him, but there's a written element here. Ad kedei kach that when somebody came to, we spoke last week about the Hara Asha'a and the Haskama of Rav Elyashiv to what Rav Moshe Shapiro pushed to be published, which is referred to as Sha'arei HaLeshem, which is the Leshem's, so to speak, machshava with regards to general sugyos in Metzias, devoid of the Kabbalah Sa'arizal at the heart of it. And it took a lot for them to publish this, but people wanted, and people were going to learn the Leshem inside. So there was a Hara Asha'a. And over there, the person who compiled the texts, who was a Haredi Mechaber, a massive Talmud Chacham and a Mekubal from Bnei Brak, who wanted to write a commentary of sorts on the text itself. And Rav Elia Weintraub, who was really one of the deepest and fullest links in the chain of the Kabbalah of the Gra, especially because he spent the first half of his life learning Balatanya, Mittler Rebbe, and always continued to learn Ishbitz and Radzin, and he saw how they were the same. But Rav Elia said no. There's a letter that Rav Elia said, no, you can't, because by other writings you need a commentary. But by the Leshem, there's a certain segula of Ruach HaKodesh and Yiras Shamayim that is oiches in the milim themselves, that you want to cherish the text itself without deviating from the text. Meaning to say, when we learn the Leshem inside, it's not just the conveying of wisdom. The book, the existence of a book like the Leshem Shu'ev Achaloma, of writings of the Leshem, the Ksavim, which they're typically referred to as, the Ksavim, It's a segula, meaning it's an access point for a person. The Sefer, the textuality of this book, the written words on the page, is a derech, is a shar for a person to encounter the neshama of the Leshem and the ha'ara that a person gets when connecting to tzaddikim of this value. So that's something to hold in mind, that like Rav Moshe said, the Sipur and the Sefer are not so distant from one another by the Leshem. The author is found in the text. And secondly, something that I saw from Rav Moshe David Vali, Skusia Ganalenu, who was a Talmud Mufak. We discussed him a little bit last week, a Talmud Mufak of the Ramchal. Talmud Mufak of the Ramchal. And Rav Moshe David Vali, in his commentary, Eis L'Chanana on the Tehillim, he describes the role of the Choshen Mishpat, of the Kohen Gadol. And he comes to the Oisios of Leshem Shvoi V'Achloima. And he says over there that the language of V'Achloima is a language of Chalom. It's a language of dreaming. And this was something for me that I had never seen before, but it was a real makkah b'patish on the whole sugya of the Leshem, that in truth what the Leshem is doing in his writing is he's offering the individual a capacity to live in a healthy space of a dream, a chal matava. That the chal matava is how to be in this world asleep, right? Asleep, ani yashena. This is the Or of Purim, is when Klal Yisrael fall asleep. Yeshnam an echad, yeshna, they're sleeping. And to dream is to hold on to the capacity of tasting Gan Eden, of being awake even when I'm asleep. That's the secret of the Chalom. The secret of the Chalom is the breaking through towards redemption within exile itself. This is how Yosef Atzadik does it. And so the Leshem Shua V'Achloma as a dream really kind of aligns how I feel about the Leshem, is that the Torah of the Leshem is the Chalom that a person can have of redemption. And it's of such a potency that it gives a person the ability to taste redemption within exile itself, which the Leshem quotes all the time in the name of the Gra, that whatever stands at the ready to be revealed in the future, not in the name of the Gra, it's based on Chazal, whatever stands at the ready to be revealed in the future can in truth be accessed and tasted in its authenticity and essentiality right here, right now. And that's the Or of the Chalom, or Rav Tzadok would refer to as the Roishem of Moichin de Gadlus within Moichin de Katnus, the irreducible trace of a past moment of mindful awareness of Hashem within the vestige and vessel of a space of total unconsciousness, which is the act of a dream. One last nakuda that I want to share about the Leshem Shuvah Chaloma now is that the Leshem writes, as we're going to see at the end of his Hakdama, he describes why his books are referred to as Leshem Shuvah Chaloma, because his name is found in them. But it's not such a raya to have such a strange and interesting name of Svarim, the third row of stones in the Choshen Mishpat. What we can identify is that the Leshem, in the end of Hakdamus Sha'arim, identifies himself as a descendant of Rav Shimshon Me'astropolia. Rav Shimshon Me'astropolia was a tzaddik who gave his life for the Klal Yisrael. There's a famous story between him and the Shach. Someone, Mashiach ben Yosef, had to be sacrificed on one level or another, and it was Rav Shimshon Me'astropolia, one of the biggest Mekubalim, who, with the Taz and the Shach, had kind of come to a place of deciding that he was going to be the one to engage in this process of self-sacrifice. But Rav Shimshon Me'astropolia, we know him most powerfully about the letter of Erev Pesach, about Geula and the Ramazim, but Ramazim Niflaim. Rav Shimshon Me'astropolia is named for Shevet Dan, Shimshon, the hero of Shevet Dan. The names of his Svarim are Dan Yadin, the names of his Svarim are Machane Dan, and he was mityachis himself back up to Machane Dan. Leshem Shuvah V'Achaloima are the stones of Machane Dan. Leshem Shuvah V'Achaloma are the stones that are associated with Dan and Naphtali. And what we know about Shevet Dan is that Shevet Dan was the lowest of all Shvatim. That they were the Shvatim that Amalek was able to attack, right? They were the Paltei Ha'anan. They were not protected by the protective sheath of the Anan, and Amalek had an achiza on them. Because Dan is a language of din, and Dan is a way of donning everything over and over, an anxious kind of self-judgment of every moment, donning this, donning that. That's the world of Shevet Dan. They're the ones who cross over in Kriyas Yamsuf with their pekalach, with their idols, kind of hidden in their bags. Dan is always representative of the lowest expression of Klal Yisrael at the state of redemption from Mitzrayim, and at the same point, this very souls that will be the ones that experience the future redemption. That our generation is a generation of Machane Dan. Dan, in the light of Purim, the Gra points out that it says Haman's name 54 times in the Megillah. 54, again, is the gematria of Dan. Hadan estinenu. that there's 54 words in the Al-Hanisim of Purim. There's an association between Purim and Dan. Because just like Dan was the ability to reveal a hidden light in the places where light was most unapparent, so too Purim is the ability to reveal that infinite light in places that it's most apparent. Nobody like the Leshem minds the sugyos of Tzimtzum and Gevura and Choshech and all of these different elements. I mean, the Mittler Rebbe of Lubavitch does it in this way, or Tzadok does, but nobody like the Leshem goes as deep into the sugyos of Gevuros, of severity, of constriction, something that at first glance in the writings of the Arizal appears to be something one should not even learn because of the psychological effects it will have on you. Not by way of mystery, but just by learning heavy things. It's heavy. The Leshem takes that and is mahapechet legamri, where gevura and intensity and manifestation and all of the things, he starts to see gevura not in the sense of difficulty, but of like quantum mechanics, of movement, of friction, of growth, of development, of the perpetual unfolding of all things. And in this place, this is what I feel very strongly. Rav Kook is very much a Talmud of the Leshem Shabbat V'Chaloma. And just a remez l'davar. So we have the connection between Dan, Purim, and the Leshem, naming his Sefer after the breastplate of Dan. We also, Leshem Shabbat V'Chaloma, Lamed Shin Vav, is the Rosh Tevos, is Gematria 336, which is the Gematria of Purim as well. So that the Leshem Shabbat V'Chaloma is very much a sugya that is connected to the light of Purim, which is connected to the Chalom, which is connected to tasting the future and the present. Hakdama Ketana Alma Shah Sefer Miyusad. So a small introduction with regards to what this Sefer is based upon. HaSefer hazeh hinehu hakdamos u'sha'arim l'chol mi shechashka nafsho lichnos behechale hakodesh penima. This Sefer is an introduction and a gate, both of which, again, I'm going to hold myself back. Introductions and gates, a hakdama and a shar, is a very different access point. A hakdama implies that I'm still caught in the postulates of thought. It's just a hakdama. A shar implies a certain spatial orientation. I'm entering into a place. And so learning the Arizal has to be both. It used to be that hakdamos Arizal, you're always learning, and it's always hakdamos, because you never fully know. But the shar, the avoida aspect of it, of being nichnas into the shar, like Chazal say that a Jew has to always enter in to two psachim, which are the Pesach of Emunah and Kedusha, of Malchus and Yesod. So that's these two expressions, a hakdama and a shar. There's a cheshek. There's a cost. There is a necessary price to be paid for an entry fee into the realm of the Heichale Kedusha, and that is chashka nafsho. A person has to want it. A person has a desire to enter into this chelik of Torah. Shehu b'toras chachmas ha'emes ha'arizal asher sefer hakadosh v'anoira eitz chayim sheyatza miyad harav chayim vital shayatal min ne'eman beisod ha'arizal kanoda. And what he means, what the Leshem identifies as the Heichale HaKodesh Penima, are the writings of the Arizal as expressed through his Talmud Amito, Rav Chaim Vital. Now again, the Leshem is not negating the Ramak, nor is he negating the Zohar HaKadosh. The Arizal was the Gushpanka, the Arizal was the stamp that contained the ink from all previous expressions of Pnimiyas HaTorah, from Har Sinai and down, and the Leshem becomes the site that contains it all. So he's not minimizing every other expression of Kabbalah, but he's describing how the Arizal holds everything together, especially Sefer Eitz Chaim Kadisha. Hine Yimsa, anyone who has that cheshek, Hine Yimsa be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach, ha'ma'ayan be'sefer hazeh, hakdamos rabos. A person is going to find, with the help of God, again, every word deserves like a book. A person is going to find, with the help of God, ha'ma'ayan be'sefer hazeh, hakdamos rabos, meaning you're being ma'ayan in it, you're paying attention to it, which is a yegiyah, but you're also finding. And this is the Segula Satorah, that Yagati Matzati Tam, and even after the Yagiyah, after the Iyun, it's still a Segula to be masig something. And so you'll merit the gift after the act of Iyun. This is what the Ramchal describes in Perek Chavvav of the Avodah of Ruach HaKodesh is Tchilaso Avodah V'Sofo Matana. That in the beginning it's effort, in the end it's a gift. To understand, learning Kabbalah is a Segula to understand what the Arizal meant. You're going to find a lot of introductions. Hein ma shenoga l'Torah ha'Arizal b'chlal. General principles in accordance with the Arizal. V'hein l'kama chumrei masnisa de'ispehu b'pratei advarim. Again, the system of the Arizal is not simply general principles, nor is it particulars. Like we spoke about last week, it's the impossible unity between the particulars within the general principle, where the prat does not destroy the light of the cloud, but rather it invigorates it. So a person will find the general principles, and a person will also find the particulars. We also hinted to things that even the person who knows the beginning will find light in these things. And we have included them and engarbed them, all of these words, in a clear and simple language. Now, engarbment is a very important language here, because engarbment means that the garments are conveying something that is within the garment. That don't be mistaken by the simplicity of the language. What the Leshem did, like we said, Rav Yisrael Salanter, the Leshem quotes, says that from Taf Reish Ba'alma, in 1840 and onwards, it is much easier to understand Kabbalah, much easier to understand the Arizal. And what was not allowed a moment before 1840 is allowed in 1840. The Leshem quotes this in the name of Rav Yisrael Salanter. We spoke about the strange question that so many people asked of whether they actually met or not. And it's in the beginning of Drushay Olam HaTohu in Deya Chelak Aleph. The Leshem, we said, was born 1841. Ki'ilu, the Leshem was the kiyum of the Haftacha of Rav Yisrael Salanter, that after 1840 there will be an access point that was not present beforehand, and the Leshem offers it in a language that is so clear. He offers it in such a clear and systematic way. B'milos pshutos hamiskablim l'chol leiv. In simple words that will be accepted by each heart. Again, the tachlis is the heart. Tachlis of the Eitz Chaim is to allow the Eitz Chaim to penetrate the heart, which is the secret of the pre-Eitz Chaim, which is what it means to daven properly. Here you get to skip all of the prior necessities. You don't have to be rugil. You don't have to be familiar with these ideas. Every excuse that a person has, generally speaking, is these are above my pay grade, these ideas are unfamiliar to me. So the Leshem is not saying, don't worry, you know them. He's saying, you don't have to be familiar. They're hakdamos usharim. How could you be familiar with the beginning if you haven't started yet? And in addition, it's very much like how the Ramchal hints at the beginning of Masil Shisharim. This book is both very simple, but also if you peer deeply, you're going to find that it is the most complex of complexities. So you'll also find someone who knows this material and understands this material, Mavin, Havana Sadavar Mitoch Davar, who can see the written word and extrapolate what the author is saying, especially when we said that the author hides in the words, especially in the Leshem, Yimtsa Osam Mavur Beher Hetiv. They'll find them Beher Hetiv, translated properly in the 70 languages, like Moshe Rabbeinu Raya Mehemna, who translated the Torah. The Kaveh Kavisi LaHashem Yisbarach Shemo, who says Kaveh Kavisi LaHashem, Yishwascha Kavisi Hashem, that's Shimshon, that's Machanadan. The whole inyan of Machanadan is the Kivoy to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And like we said, the Leshem is coming from this place. Kaveh Kavisi LaHashem Yisbarach Shemo, and I have a deep hope towards Hashem, Shekol Misha Mishtoikek Litoim Tam Eitz HaChaim Ulios Mehasridim Asher Hashem Koira Yimtza Rav HaToyeles Mehasefer Hazeh. And it is my greatest hope in the world that anyone, again, the prerequisite of Hishtoikakus, this is the second time the Leshem has used the language of Cheshek in the first paragraph with regards to the introduction into Pnimiyas HaTorah. Anybody who wants to taste the taste of the Eitz HaChaim, like we said before, to taste the future now, to taste it. Not to know it, to taste it. To realize that the book of the Arizal is something that offers a taste in this world. Lios me'asridim asher Hashem koira, to be those who are called to be separate, who feel that call from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yimtza rav toelas me'asefer hazeh. You'll find a lot of toelas here. It's not like the Rambam says in Mishnah Torah, this is all you have to learn. There's no need to learn anything else. Here he's saying you'll find a lot of toelas. Hagam shehu katan bekamuso, even though quantitatively it's minimal, it's a small book. And here it looks bigger. If you look at the older Barzani editions, which are B'moich and the Gadlus, it's a very thin book, by far the thinnest of all the Leshem's books. Why is it memuat bekamuso? Not because there's not a lot to say, but kirov devarim klulim bo v'akol b'lashon sach v'naki. The language is folded over upon itself. When you look at the language, you uncover the infinite vistas that each word, that's what it means to write B'lashon Pashut. The language is no longer something that deviates away from the idea, but rather the language is so fine and bare that it offers the idea fully. And like the Gra says, and Rav Menachem Mendel Shklov brings in his Hakdama to Perush on Mishlei, that we have a klal from Rabbeinu HaGra, that a person cannot understand Razan HaTorah, Sod, without understanding Pshat, and a person can't understand Pshat without understanding Sod. Zakta Tzadikim, not because they're two separate things, but the Oimek HaPshat is the Sod, and the Omek HaSod is the Pshat. What is the deepest secret of all reality. That's the Avodah of Purim. Hamatchil ka'asher lilmod, and here the Leshem is being very realistic. Hamatchil ka'asher yilmod oso merosho lesofo. Somebody who begins, the beginner, who studies this from its beginning to its end, yihiyeh lo mavul gadol b'chachmas emes b'chlal. A person is going to find a tremendous opening into the general principles of the secrets of Torah. Here, the Leshem is not saying kaveh kavisi. It's not hope. The Leshem trusts his product. We see the Leshem is mevatel himself at the end of the Sakdama as if he's absolutely nothing but a pen, and then the next moment he's like, but if you buy this book, you will taste Gan Eden. And that is the prerequisite to read a book, but written by a tzaddik. They're going to find the tremendous opening ad shenirali, to the point that it appears to me anybody who's incapable of studying the secrets of Torah properly, and a person doesn't have the ability to commit a certain amount of time to this type of limud, right, he'll be malamed zchus. The reason you can't study Pnimiyas HaTorah is because of all of the burdensome aspects of your divine service that you have. This Sefer, Akdamus Sha'arim, is a tamtzitz. This is a kolbo. This is like the Mishnah Torah, Kavyachal. This is the only Sefer you need. Umagam ki achar sheyitoim tam noyam ziv divrei eitz chayim ya'iru einav mimenu hin ein safek hu sheyem tzala atzmo al kapanim eisel zman lasos ezak kvias b'chol yom lezeh. This is a Sefer of Rabbi Soslanter again, saying not only will be biyotze the need to study this, but if you study it properly, you'll certainly come to find you have a lot more time than you thought to study these ideas.
Does that indicate that you should be learning this every day?
To Hakdamus Hasharim, it seems, especially in line with what we said, what Rav Moshe Shapiro said about the books of the Leshem, that there's not such a distinction between the Sefer and the Sipor, that the author is not so far from the text. That's a textual giloi. If he seems to be giving Likvoa b'chol yom eis v'zman ra'oi lezeh. Again, we have to differentiate with the Gra, what eis means, what zman means. Again, especially with the Leshem, we have the power to be medayik. Even if it's an achron sheva achronim writing now, we have the power to be medayik because the Torah comes from a place beyond the author. But by the Leshem, we could be medayik, and it does sound like there's a l'kvoya b'chol yom v'eis b'zman lazeh. Right. So you'll find that you have more time if a person truly tastes the pleasantness, and their eyes will be illuminated. In ein safek, there's no doubt. Right, he's doubling it. In the end, he's like restating that, the prerequisite is each day. Yeah, weiter? Any questions? Okay, gewalt. V'amru b'meseches Atzilus b'tchilaso. Meseches Atzilus is a chelik of the Zohar. It's a later strata of the Zohar, so to speak, but Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver wrote a perush on Meseches Atzilus as well. Eliyahu ben Yosef Pasach. Eliyahu, the son of Yosef, opens. Ksiv. Pasuk says, Soid Hashem li'areyav u'brisoy le'haidiyim. The secret of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is found by those who are fearful of Him, and His covenant is going to be made aware to them. Meho ulpina, from here we learn, She'en HaKadosh Baruch Hu megala soidav ki im li'areyav. Here we see that the gilui of a soid, the revelation of the secret, so to speak, or His secret, Hashem's secret, is only revealed to those who have this aspect referred to as yira. If a person has learned it all, but they don't have yira, it's a beautiful lashon. For naught have they spent time kind of wading in these clarified depth waters. And all the effort you've put in is for naught. And anybody who is a Yireh Shemayim has a natural proclivity to chase after Nistaros. Again, the Leshem in the first paragraph said Cheshek twice. That if you have a Cheshek to learn this, the Tishkoy. But at the same point, who has a Cheshek to learn Pnimiyas HaTorah? Those who are drawn after Pnimiyas HaTorah. The Cheshek, a person can create the Cheshek, but the Cheshek is a pre-existent Cheshek. If you're a Yirav, you're already Roidef Achar Nistaros.
Sounds like the Cheshach is the Yireh Shemayim.
Yeah, it could certainly be. Cheshach, again, Cheshach is the recognition that we're stuck in a body. Sachak, it's the birthplace of laughter also. That when the Sachak and Yafa Kadeshi Adaka and Adaka, that's the Osias of Cheshek. Cheshek is a breaking apart of experience so that I can desire to enter into a new level of experience. One who has a singularity to experience has no need to have Cheshek to anything. Sha'afilu, right, so he's saying, Umaisa Merkava Shu Ikar HaChachma V'Hadas, V'chule V'chule, Kvoid Eloikim Hester Davar. And Maseches Atzilas continues and he says, and the Maisa Merkava, which is the essence of the wisdom and the knowledge of God, is referred to as Kvoid Eloikim Hester Davar. So Rabbi Nachman, those who learn Rabbi Nachman know that this mimer is typically read as Kvoid Eloikim, you want to respect HaKadosh Baruch Hu, conceal the secret. Don't talk about it. Here, listen to this teaching. What does the Maseches Atzilas say? Emasai ata oisela Eloikim kavod. When are you going to bring honor to Hashem? When is it kavod Eloikim? B'shah she'ata oisik b'nistaros. You want to bring kavod to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hester Davar. Learn Sisrei Torah. Va'ani teima ma'od, says Leshem, I have a really big issue. It's a wonderment. Al eza chachmei hador. On certain wise ones of the generation. She'en lahem yediyah mizeh klal. So it's really hard. Again, I'm biased. I see so much of the relationship between Rav Kook and the Leshem in this kind of the social reality. Yeah. Rav Kook sat for a month at least with the Leshem before he ever came to Eretz Yisrael. He was in the first town that he was Rav. I'm forgetting exactly where. In Zoymel, he had asked them to give him a break to go and learn by the Leshem. He sat there for a month. Rav Kook himself, the language says that he was mevarer ikar yisoidei chachma to me. There was a continued relationship by way of letters, where the Leshem writes that he would put on, Rav Kook writes that he would put on Big Day Shabbos to receive the books of the Leshem. When he received Takdamus Sha'arim, he said that a book like this has not been written since Pardes Rimonim, which is interesting because both are succinct descriptions of pre-existing systems that predated them, offering kind of like a real Tamsitz. Not only that, Rav Kook was the one, along with Rav Herzog, who brought the Leshem and Rav Yosef Shalom Elyashiv to Eretz Yisrael, where Rav Aryeh Levine became the Shamish in Yerushalayim, and Rav Kook would come to be Mevar and Yanim. Rav Charlap, the Nazir, they each had a little bit of a pagisha with the Leshem because of what we'll see of Mirz Hashem, how the Leshem felt about people who studied Ramchal too much. And for the Nazir, right, the Ramchal was the Sharish. It wasn't so much the Gra, that Rav Kook was rooted fundamentally in Ramchal. But the Leshem and Rav Kook had a yedidus and an imus, and I think but my feeling is that the Torah themselves is almost like a twin Torah. Again, not to say that either one needs the other, right? This is whenever I say this, people want to say, like, no, Rav Kook doesn't need, everybody needs teachers, and everybody needs tzaddikim that they come from. So yeah, I see it as a real. So over here, what the Leshem is criticizing, it seems, is the fact that there's certain Talmidei Chachamim, and he gestures to it earlier on when he says, like, if you can't find time to learn because of all of your Eisek HaKodesh, you could still find time to learn. But here he says, I have a problem with certain wise ones in the generation, so I don't know who this is. It could just have been like the zeitgeist of the time. She'ein lahem yediyah b'zeh klal. Again, I'm sorry, the tangent, what we said is that the Leshem is peravi'i to the Gra, even though he's so historically removed from the Gra. And it could be because we said there was the Gra, and those who were Roei Pnei HaGra, Rav Menachem Mendel of Shkulav, Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, they were the ones who are meshuggah for Nistaros more than anything in the world. Meshuggah for it, in a way that we don't even see by Talmidei Abal Shem Tov. And then you have Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver and Rav Yitzchak Kellner, who came to Yerushalayim to settle, and he wrote his Svarim. But then you see a real kind of cut in the tradition. Rav Chaim Volozhin obviously as well. Then there's a cut in the tradition of kind of real, rooted, Gra-oriented study of the writings of the Arizal. It always existed, but it was not kind of what was happening in a popularized way. This is all conjecture. And so the Leshem, who sees himself as a fourth kind of tenuah, the fourth movement in the dance of the Gra, so here he might even be responding to the very simple fact that it had no longer functioned as an essential part of a Lithuanian yeshiva system at this point. Right? Brisk was not necessarily... Brisk was the mechanisms of Pnimius HaTorah, but it was not the content of Pnimius HaTorah. Adrabah, Brisk is the ability, with the mechanisms of Pnimius HaTorah, to transform Niglas HaTorah into Pnimius HaTorah. Because the Chakira, there's a Rav Chaim Brisker, in my humble opinion, is as esoteric as the Leshem Shabbat V'Chaloima. It's a different body of thinking, but both is the utilization of a dimyon de kedusha, zichuch of the mind, to allow the mind to become a framing of the Torah. So I have a problem, he says. I need tema ma'od al eze chachmei ador she'en lahem yediyah bazaklal. They're not aware of this. How can you get away with not learning chachmas ha'emes, she panimius haTorah, which is the inner interiority of the Torah? To the extent that they mamish have absolutely no idea what it is. And all of their answers and all of their explanations are not enough. And again, the Leshem is only raising this after he's offered a solution. He's not just raising a problem. Why is nobody studying Pnimis HaTorah? Because it's not an Eitzah to go and learn Eitz Chaim. That'll confuse you more than anything. Leshem offers a solution. This book is all you need. And once he offers a solution, he says, now let's talk about the problem that no one's doing this. All of the answers are not enough. Klal, Achasher Amru Erevin Nun Hey Reish Amud Aleph, Chazal tell us, Loi B'Shamayim Hi. It's not in Shamayim. She'im B'Shamayim Hi Atat Tzarech La'alos Acharecha. Meaning, it's not in Shamayim. But the statement of Chazal is, and if it was in Shamayim, that still wouldn't be a Patur. Not knowing is not a Patur. Not having your chinuch azoy is not a Patur. This is not what I learned to learn. That's not a Patur. B'chlal, he says. V'im avar liyam, and if it's beyond the sea, ata tzarech lavor acharecha. All that means is that a person has to chase after it. Upashidhu sha'kavanahu al kol chelkei haTorah kulan. And it's obvious over there that Chazal are talking about the entirety of the Torah in its full expression. She'ein shum hitznatzlas liptor mehem. There's no reasonable excuse to ignore a fundamental element of the Torah. B'chol aleph mechuyev la'asos, b'chol chelkei, b'chol echad lefi kocho. And each and every person has a responsibility, a chiyuv, to learn each one in accordance with their strength and capacity. And here the Leshem takes it a step upwards, meaning so that's the validation and the need to learn Pnimius HaTorah from the perspective where all elements of Torah are on equal footing. Uma gam hachelak hanistar asher achar kol reimumus malis Torah kedushas HaTorah masha efsher lahaleg lachshoy v'laseichel espoinin begodol hashevach v'amaled ha'oisek be'ezah chelak mechalkeha. Leshem says, and even more so, after all is said and done and all of the possible praise and expression of praise that can be expressed about every other chelik of Torah, hine hachelek hanister hi alsa al kulana. And here the Leshem is not stating a shita. Leshem is not, this is not an opinion. He has the receipts. If the Leshem is saying it, this is not a Hasidish idea. This is why this is a Leshem idea. It's a Pnimius HaTorah idea. K'moshe mevur b'gemara b'kama mekoymas brachos chafalef amud beis sha'afilu oisik b'maisem merkava v'chulei b'chim b'sukkah koyach amud aleph b'chagiga b'kama mekoymas kenoida. That emphasize not the superiority, but the depth of encounter, and yes, even a level of superiority to other chalakim in the Torah, again, not diminishing any element of the Torah, but even adding a layer of power that Pnimius HaTorah has. Again, Leshem is bringing out the Lashon of Kivoy, which is a language associated with Shimshon. Lishuascha Kivisi Hashem, which is the 54 times Haman is found in the Megillah, which is the Amalek's Achiza on Dan, which is why it's the stones of Dan, Leshem Shebeh V'Achloma, again crying out with hope. Hineni Mekaveh Me Hashem Yisparach, I hope from Hashem Yisparach. Ki HaSefer HaNochachi Halaz Yigdal Schus HaRabim Ma'od. Schus HaRabim. It's not about him. Ki kol Talmud v'tzoyrev yachol litoim ta'amel lichnos lilagea b'setzei sunah. It's not enough that you'll understand, you'll taste it. Again, I'm not offering just a book, I'm offering myself in a book. I'm offering the Hamshacha of Pnimius HaTorah. The Leshem is an authentic outgrowth of not only the Gra, but the Arizal. The Leshem is like a Makkah b'patish on the system of the Arizal. Nobody, and it's very difficult. You can do it with the Rashash. People can do it with the Baal HaSulam. Apparently, the Baal HaSulam, it's a different sugya altogether. Kulam tzadikim, but there's certain tzadikim who you can really learn a mahalach in the ksavim of the Arizal in. It's very difficult, and this is maybe my own bias, to imagine even beginning to study any aspect of this without having understood or learned the sugyos of the Leshem and the way that the Leshem learns things up. It would be a nevuchim legamrei. I had a Rebbe once, Rav Asher Bailinson in OJ, had said that he was describing Kabbalah. He was a Talmud of Rav Moshe Shapiro. Also, he said that the Leshem is like the Rav Chaim to the Arizal. He's like the Rav Chaim. Like we said, it's like a Tosfos that sees all of the writings as being part of one fell swoop, and therefore we need to learn the principles necessary for smoothing out the discrepancies rather than thinking they're talking about different things. That it's going to enlarge and help grow the schus of the rabbim. Each and every person can enter into the sfeines haTorah. So the Ma'arav Tuvcha Shetzafan L'Recha, which is the language of Sfas. Ki yiklot kol echad lefi kocho. Ki yiklot kol echad lefi kocho. This is Klal Gadol in any aspect of spirituality, that it's a relative positioning of one's own subjective formation. As I understand it, my koyach, my potency, and I'll be koilated, I'll receive it, it will have an impact. Chlita means actually allowing the thing to kind of disintegrate and to become part of me. That's the tachlis here. And for those of you who have already tasted the taste of the tree of life, each and every person in accordance with their standing, they'll also find the To'alas Rav b'Toyer Sa'arizal, Ulhatzilo mekama mevuchos via lefanav kamei ma'akshim l'meishor. Again, he's clarifying, he's using a language, and it's true. And the only way that the Leshem is miyasher the nevuchos is by utilizing kind of really the Rambam and Moreh Nevuchim as a fundamental element to how we understand what Pnimius HaTorah is coming to tell us. Leshem has a Hagah in the back of this, on the first shar, where he says, prior to the Tzimtzum, the Moreh Nevuchim is Moshe Emes v'Seirosai Emes u'Moshe ad Moshe lehaya k'Moshe. He doesn't use that Lashon, but why? Because just like Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to be masik the panim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he was told, you can't see my face, you can only see the backside, you can't understand that thing in its essence, you could only understand by way of negation, haslagas hashlila, negative theology, so to speak. So too the Rambam teaches us the very same thing in Moreh Nevuchim. At the end of the day, you can't know anything. And all conversation and all language is what is born after that fundamental acceptance of not knowing and not being able to grasp any element of true truth. So before the Tzimtzum, that's true, and we have no access to Atzmusi Yisbarach on any level. After the Tzimtzum, we have the Arizal. That's what the Leshem writes. After the Tzimtzum, we have the Arizal. There, we're no longer... He wasn't claiming the Leshem New Kabbalah. He was saying, there we have the Arizal, Baruch Hashem. Now he's going to go through an overview of what the Sefer is going to look like. And I'm not going to get caught up in the terminology so much because, it would just deviate. And we'll get there. This Sefer is a description of the unfolding process, the Seder of the revelations of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Asher Yatzav Neskal Behem, through which he himself is emergent and revealed within them, meaning it is the description of the stages of revelation within which the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is found. Hashem's essence is rooted in the revelation of Hashem's essence. There's 5 general categories of gradational growth. These are the principles of the principles. That once you abstract them, you can see how they apply on every level of revelation, from one revelation to the other. And these 5 stages comprise everything that a person can ever conceive of in the writings of the Arizal. Not only are we talking about the general principles, describing the grand shape of all of existence, we're also describing the 5 general principles which are found within each and every particular world, meaning what you see begadol is also true bekatan. It's a fractal, meaning what is true in the most generalized way is also true in the most particularized way. And these Hegiluyim, these 5 stages of revelation in their general properties exist in each and every world. And then in each general property you have all 5 subsets and 5 subsets ad infinitum. And what are these 5 gradations? These are the partsufim that the Arizal discusses. Vehem arich anpin, which is associated with keser. Abba ve'ima, which is associated with chachma and bina. Zer anpin, which is associated with chesed, gvura, tferes, netzach, hoid, yisoid. And the nukva of zer anpin, which is associated with malchus. Hamufursim b'divrei hamikubalim, which is very clear and made famous in the writings of the Mekubalim. It's interesting, he's saying Mekubalim because B'derech Klal, this is seen as not a creation, but a discovery or a revelation of the Arizal. But the Leshem himself in writings, and Kuli Amalo Pligi, that the Ramak, it's not that the Ramak didn't know this, it's that it's a Hamshacha. The Ramak served a particular role. Like we said, marak is a soup that comes before the meal. Right? But towards the end of his life, the Ramak wrote in Sefer Ilama Rabasi, where the Leshem points out that here you already see the emergence of the concept of the Partzuf, which are these 5 general collections of entities that are revealed. And so here the Leshem is saying Begadol, he says, Mefursam B'divrei Mekubalim. He's not saying it's simply the Arizal. Uvehei pratim kol echad sheim naran chai. And in addition, in each of those general categories, each world has these 5 stages, and each of those 5 worlds that have those 5 stages, each one has another 5 stages, which we refer to as naran chai, which is nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, and yechida. Again, how all of these 5 levels are reflective of one another, over and over. Umevar ha-sefer kol echad ve'echad hein men haklalim hein men hapratim. And the Sefer in each of the Sharim is going to go through one by one, both the general principles as well as the particular expression. In Yano Madrigaso, its description as well as its own standing and the role that it plays in the system. In Yano is how you look at it on its own, what its inyan is. Madrigaso is how you look at it in relationship with something else. Shemosav, the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that are associated with it. Upu'uloisav, and the actions that it brings out. Right, Saloimer Giluyav V'toyalto. What does it mean it's pu'ula? What does it mean when we talk about the pu'ula of the partzufim or what's happening in the world of Atzilus? What that means is its revelation and the purpose of its revelation. Amashu meshamish, what role does it play? Because the Leshem is the most tachlis-oriented tzad, all the tzaddikim are. Like Rabbi Nachman says, yesh tachlis, yesh tachlis l'tachlis, yesh tachlis l'tachlis l'tachlis. Everything is b'tachlis. Everything is mis'ala to a tachlis. And therefore, it's not about knowing the moving parts, but it's about knowing the tachlis of the moving parts. Umahu mishamesh v'chein yachas haklali lahaklale klalos v'yachas haprati lahaklale v'kusharim v'yichudim zebazeh. As well as the interrelationship between what is seemingly the various levels of the generalities of the general principles as well as the particulars. The klale haklalim, the klalim, and the pratim. V'yichudim zebazeh, and their unification, and how each one is dependent upon the other. V'chein mevar ha-sefer gam kein chaluki ha-madrigos ben olamas ha-ne'etzalim lo-olamas ha-nevraim. And so too the Sefer is going to be very careful to describe the separation between the world of Atzilus and the worlds of separation of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. Here one can really see a polemical push against a certain tendency, perhaps in elements of Hasidus that seem to allow for some porous boundary between Atzilus and Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. I spoke about this in a shir on Rav Yitzchak Meyer Morgenstern. Here, the Leshem is very much going to be clear. The world of Atzilus is where Atzmusa Yisbarach is going to be in Niskala, where God himself, so to speak, is going to be identifiable with revelation. But in the worlds of separation, as we understand them, God forbid, may Haidaisa, to identify creation with godliness. Godliness is ever present within creation, but to identify the two of them together would be tantamount to a real form of Avodah Zarah. So here the Leshem is saying, and don't worry, we're going to really describe the Chalukei HaMadregos, the distinctions of levels between the worlds of Atzilus and the worlds of creation. Hu Yesod Kol HaTorah Kula, which is nothing less than the foundation of the entirety of the Torah. HaKolul B'Hashnei Dibros HaRishonos. The distinction between the world of Atzilus and the worlds of separation is the description of the 2 first dibros, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, which is how we understand the world of Atzilus. How do we understand Hashem revelation to us? The interplay between Kalim and Oros, and the impossible unity between the two of them. And Lo Yelechach Elohim Achirim is how to never come to identify separation or creation with divinity, God forbid. Ve'ech Shehu Yisbarach Shemoy Echad Yachid Miyuchad B'Kulam. And how at the same point, in spite of the differences of gradational levels and the stark difference we have to create between Atzilus, which is the unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Biyah, Bria Yitzir Asiya, which is the separation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, after stating the need to splinter the HaKadosh Baruch Hu's expression into Anochi and Lo Yihya, that don't think that it's doubled, God forbid, because we're also going to explain how be'emes, Eichshu Yisbarach Shemoy Echad Yachad Miyuchad B'kulam. He's found and he's present in each and every one of these elements. B'mitziusam lamala u'b'kiyumam v'hanhagasam lamata. Both in the root of their existence and an ontological level above, as well as their continued expression and their outgrowth and functioning down here. To the extent that in the end of the day, what we're saying with all of the differentiation that we're going to see, ein oid milvado. Kol zeh mitbayar kan ba'arucha b'rechava. Here, everything is going to be expressed at length and in expansion, which is a far cry from what he described to Sefer as a minute ago, which is, although it's miut hakamas, even though it's minimal in its kind of quantity, over here we can say, how can it be minimal in its quantity, but arucha b'rachva? But that's a quality. The quality is expansive. With more iterations and descriptions of ideas that are associated with the words of the Arizal and the general principles of Kabbalah. Specifically with regards to the Yichud of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yichud Yisbarach Shemay B'chol Ha'olam Eskulam. That's going to be the emphasis, the unity of all things. This is what this book will be discussing. It will be clarifying it in depth and in width, and it will ascend to the heights of the heights, and it will penetrate and descend down to the abysmal depths. And even though in truth the matters discussed here are exceedingly deep, again, the confidence in his product. The Leshem is saying, I am doing something for you that has not happened before. And again, to read in line with the Rav Yisrael Salanter's Haftacha, that 1840 will be a year of revelation, the Leshem is born 1841. Amnan, I love this part. These are reading rules of engagement. Amnan zeu klal pashut b'chol limud chadash b'chol sefer asher hu mesuder b'prakav v'sharim z'achar zeh. There is an obvious reality when it comes to any new study that a person is undergoing, especially a book that is written by way of, gradation from one topic to the next and one shar to the next. Person cannot expect nor desire to know everything at the outset of their journey. And don't lose your mind over the fact that there's going to be certain ideas that you don't fully grasp at the beginning. I promise you can trust, your heart can take confidence in the fact that things will be explained later on. But the author needs to utilize the language that you don't yet know in order to get you to a place where you can understand what that language means. And so if you see phraseology that's thrown out, we just heard the names of the partzufim. Arachan pen Abba v'Ima Zun. That's Gans Kabbalah Arizal. But none of us know what that means on any level. I can only speak for myself. And so he says, be careful and be patient and be a gracious reader, basically. This is what the author had to do. Alkein yaspik atzmo hama'ayan kol ma sheyilkot betchilasan. Again, this lashon of klita, of really allowing the ideas to integrate and become part of the individual themselves. That you should ki yaspik atzmo, right? Be hasameach b'chelko, like be okay, be satisfied with the little bit that you're getting, because the deepest secret, as Leshem is going to say, because by tasting a little bit, you're tasting everything. Everything is in everything. Leshem has a lashon where he gets really unconscious in his writings in klalim, where he keeps repeating this lashon, ki hakol hu bakol, ki hakol hu bakol. Everything is in everything. Again, and that's while maintaining the independent identity of each and everything.
All the we said, if the Sefer is built on like a shalom, right, and it's then you would have to understand it, step one, before you get
that's avada, but this is all, meaning, you're right.
So you know stuff, but you also not knowing stuff.
It's becoming familiar with the language. I hear what you're saying very much, meaning it is shlavim, but it's also not. He said, in the end of it, it's all saying inam avada. That's what Leshem just summarized for all of this. The pratim and the pratim, all of it is saying Einon Levado. That's what the focus is on. So on the one hand, yes, a person has to, on the one hand, this direction to the reader is because here's a system in front of you. Let's say there's 7 levels that you have to ascend. Go to the first one first. And even if I talk about the third level and the first level, so don't be upset that you don't know what the third level is. But the Leshem is also going to hint to the fact that there's another reason you don't have to worry so much. Because be'emes, whatever it is that you're understanding, be satisfied with. If it's a 7-leveled gradational growth, you don't tell a person to be satisfied with the first level. That's not the goal. But if everything is found in everything, so then you can tell the reader to be satisfied with what they're finding.
Like language immersion.
Yeah, mamish. How so?
You go into an immersive environment. You're hearing all these
Exactly
words.
right. Without knowing, absolutely.
That's how you grasp.
That's how you pick it up. And so Zak Leshem. Okay, Zak Leshem Amnam B'Sharvav Me Parakei, right there. V'Halla Hine Nimshach Liha Inyan Masha Ina Me'ikr Kavanas HaSefer B'Chlal. Over there, Leshem is saying there's a deviation from the Sefer. There he's talking about Leah and Rachel and different halagos of the Shechina, and it's fundamentally valuable to everything, but it's not a fundamentally essential piece of the building blocks of the Sefer. Right, if he's identifying that as it's like the first 10 prakim of the, right, exactly, of the Ramchal. So listen to what he says. This is the way of Torah, that you follow it from one thing to another. Why? And here's what I was saying. Why is it that by nature, when a person is learning one sugya, they want to go into another sugya? Naturally. Because be'emes kol Torah kula inyan achdas, inyan echad. There's an achdas at the heart of the Torah. Shekol chelek hu kolol mehakol. Every chelek of the Torah is kolol mehakol. Meaning, say there's a pardes of pshat, there's a pardes of remes, there's a pardes of drash, there's a pardes of sod, there's a pardes of the pshat within sod, etc., etc. So whenever you touch one piece, you're touching everything. And if the reader wants to, it's not going to mess you up. We have 8 minutes. The language here is beautiful. I'm going to try. Again, we'll read as much as we can. Any questions on anything we've seen? Stay there. I love this because now the Leshem is going to talk about himself. After selling his product as if a product like this has never existed. I was able to do all of this because I was able to receive the help that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given me in order to author this through the great chesed that he has given me. To reveal deep and wondrous ideas in the Torah of the Arizal. And these are the 3 books that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has allowed me to write. Like we said before, this is the last book that was written. The first ones were Sefer Hadeya, Drushay Olamato, Chelak Aleph and Beis, then Sefer HaKlalim, Chelak Aleph and Beis, Klali Pashtus Vestalkus, and then Sefer HaBiurim, which is Koilel, about 350 pages on the Eitz Chaim itself, and it only goes up to Shar HaNekudim, which is one of the I think it's Shar Zayin in the Eitz Chaim out of the 50 Sharim. As he says, in addition, Shnayim mehem yikru b'shem chilkei adrushim, Drushay Olamatohu, and Drushay Aklalim. So there's the Drushay Olamatohu, Shenizka Gamkein Bekama Pa'amim b'shem Hadeya. It's known as Sefer Hadeya. Bashenu Sefer Aklali Espashtus V'Staklus, the expressions of egression and regression in the creation of the worlds, the unfolding and the refolding. Shenizka Gamkein Bekama Pa'amim b'shem Sefer Aklalim. So there's Hadeya and there's Haklalim. V'Gimel hu Chelak HaBiurim. Gimel is Chelak HaBiurim, and that's a beer on Eitz Chaim. And then Hine Sefer Hadeya, who kolel Beis Chalakim. It has 2 volumes to it. The first volume, Chelak Aleph, Umedaber Me'inyan Amalchin Kadmin, it's discussing the sugya of the Shviras HaKelim of the 8 kings of Edom, which are described at the end of Parshas Vayishlach and described in the writings of the Arizal. There it's the technicality. Sharashim v'yasoidim mitziyusam malchusam misasam shvirasam v'toldosam mishavis mizeh. It's their roots and foundations and existence and their kingship and their death and their shattering and the outgrowth and traumatic symptoms that come about from that. the cause and the purpose of all of this. And we also, once we trace it from above down in its traumatic falling, we also trace it from the bottom back up in terms of its healing back up to its source. And the second volume is in addition to these ideas, with an additional depth in it. Madrigos matzav ha'olamus shekodem ha'chet, the description of the world prior to the chet. Shinuyim v'yiridasam al yidei ha'chet, its changes and its differentiation as a result of the chet. Oimek hanyanim of the Eitz Hadas and the Eitz HaChaim. Imkama amukos nishkavos b'sod lavyasan v'ziv shadei b'haimos b'harei aleph. Here, when people say like they're in machshava, or in the world of Rav Moshe Shapiro and the machshava side of it, this is what they mean. Chelak Beis and Deya is where most people are finding kind of the ideas that can be understood, that are built upon the prate pratim of the Arizal, but can be understood as well to a certain degree without the Arizal. Imoid kam and yanam kehenu with various ideas of derech klal hine neflos medaber bo. Particularly speaking, it's a wondrous thing that's discussed in that Sefer. So even though I'm still engaged in its fulfillment, HaKadosh Baruch should give me the strength to accomplish and to fulfill His desire, my desire for His sake, again that cheshek. There's also things that are prepared to be printed. Already at this point it's more than 300 written pages, gedolim, which means on both sides. And in truth, there's absolutely no limitation to what I can write about these things. I've completed Sefer HaKlalim Yisparach Shemo already for a number of years. Again, the Leshem was waiting for publishers. It's amazing. That language of Ariga, Nafshi Sarug, I think it's the same Osios. That, I could be wrong, it could be Ayin Aleph, either way, they're deeply connected. Ariga is a weaving, it's an unfolding. It is the order of Hishtalshlus, how there is a singular dual pulsation at the heart of folding and unfolding. Ariga Sa'ilamos, the emergence of the worlds from one another. From the most lofty of worlds that is hidden within the hidden recesses of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the lowest level of expression in the bottom of the worlds of separation that is created ex nihilo, something from nothing. One of the most amazing things that the Leshem does here is he takes all of the worlds from Atzilus and he plants them back into the world of Adam Kanmun. There's an amazing Haskama that Rav Moshe Shapiro wrote on a Sefer called Yid Gimel Ma'arachos by somebody named Rav Shlomo Pachima. I'm not sure exactly what his name is. It's an amazing language where he says the Iker Chiddush of the Leshem is transplanting everything that's said in the world of Atzilus, which is typically seen as the loftiest place we can go, and rooting that back in the world of Adam Kanmun, which is just relativizing the system to reveal that what we thought was the top is never the top because it's just infinite gradations. This person, Rav Pachima, just wrote a 2-volume Sefer based on a Leshem called Torah's Ha'aliyos Ha'atid, about the progression from this world in the 6th millennia to the 7th millennia to the 8th millennia to the 9th to the 10th. Rav Itchemeyer is very osik in that Sefer right now. Mamish, it's describing how everything is emergent from above to below, and then the process of the ascent from below to above.
This is abstraction that you were talking about last week?
It's all abstraction, right? Hapshata vod hapshata. Yes, this is exactly it. When we describe all of their rooting in Olam of Adam Kanman, we're going to see the interconnection between Machshava and Maisa, and how the beginning and the end are interrooted. And how all of them have emerged out of one another in one fell swoop. Mispire, Hakol ba'aruch b'pratas im oid kam enyanim hanimshach lisem inyan b'neshkavitz v'nitzaros b'divi arizal u'sefer nifla v'neir mesuda l'tfus machzik ran dapim g'doylim miksav yad. Sefer Gimel Shu Chelak HaBiurim, right? The commentary on Eitz Chaim, Shehu Bir al Eitz Chaim, Hine Hu Gamkein Sefer Shalim Gadol B'Kamas V'Eikos, Hine Sham Hagam She'adayin Lo Higasi Be'el Rak Ad Seif Shar Mati V'Lei Mati, which is the beginning. Im Kol Zeh Hinu Yachsek Tzihila L'Keil Yisparach Shemo Erech Shin Dapim Gedolim. It's already 300 pages. Mispar Sham Divrei Eitz Chaim Pshutin B'Oimkam. like we said from the Grub, Shad and Oimek. V'lenishar by dibar echad b'lei bir, and there's not a single word that exists without a clarification. Like the Oimek hadvarim shemedubar by b'chol inyan v'inyan hini hu sefer gadol gam b'kamas noisef al gadol ichuso. We're going to stop here because what we'll start off with next Shir Mirz Hashem is where the Leshem begins to talk about himself now. After describing the greatness of all of his books, here the Leshem is going to see, and with regards to me, I am nothing but a pen in the hands of the infinite. I am nothing of nothing of nothing. That's just Hashem. Shkoyach.